The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily represent those of any organization, including One Generation Away.
The freedom of a people to choose its leaders is the root of liberty.
Keep alive this experiment in liberty.
Liberty, in case you've forgotten, is the soul's right to breathe.
Government should be very minimal in protecting liberty.
Peace cannot be purchased at the cost of liberty.
The sturdy ground of liberty.
Liberty once lost is lost forever.
Fight for their liberty and for our security.
Guarantees individual liberty.
This great republic, born alone in liberty.
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 Liberty. Liberty.
Just how much do you want liberty?
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner,
a production of LibertyNation.com.
cutting through the double talk, taking on the topics, going after what the politicians really mean, and making it all clear. For your freedom and your liberty. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Mr. Giuliani goes to Washington and shakes things up. But have his bold statements in recent days made matters better or worse for the president? Welcome back into Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com. And we'll dive into the controversial statements by Giuliani and bring you the latest on the special counsel investigation by Robert Mueller from a number of angles, legal and political, including a discussion with LibertyNation.com political correspondent Graham Noble. It appears that the audacious statements by rap artist Kanye West in support of the president are having a real effect on black support for Trump. We'll talk that over with Jeff Charles of LibertyNation.com. And in a Liberty Nation exclusive, our own Scott Cosenza reports on his own close encounter with Stormy Daniels, and you will not want to miss it.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
But we kick things off with our signature segment, Say What, where we roll out some of the most wacky, astonishing, and damnable things uttered by politicians and the chattering class on the events and issues of the day. And we now know why Rudy Giuliani was brought on board by President Trump. To be the public face, the spokesman for the president's legal team. And he certainly made his presence felt this week, particularly on Fox News, where he said Mueller's got nothing on the president, but implied that Trump will agree to an interview with special counsel Robert Mueller for 2 or 2.5 hours.
That's the amount of time that we would allow, only because that's what Clinton got. He got only 2.5 hours, and he fought with them over discovery. We've given them 1.2 million documents. Didn't fight with them over it. We could have raised presidential privilege, other privileges. We gave them a complete picture of what's going on. They should be able to do this if they have a case in 2.5 hours, or they want to dispose of it. I mean, everybody forgets the basis of the case is dead. Sessions should step in and close it. This started as collusion with the Russians. Now they go to obstruction of justice, collusion among the players. What they're really trying to do is trap them into perjury.
Right. So let's talk about...
And we're not suckers.
We're not suckers. It's that kind of sentiment that shows you why the hard-nosed, combative former mayor of New York was brought on board, to shake things up for better or worse. Meanwhile, the man who's been out in front in providing objective legal analysis on the Mueller probe has been the liberal law professor Alan Dershowitz. On CNN this week, Dershowitz was clear about where he thinks Mueller is headed with Trump.
I think where we're going is to a subpoena. I think right now the president's legal team should have no interest in answering these enormously broad questions voluntarily. They'll get the same broad questions artfully asked at a grand jury, but at least they'll be able to challenge, A, the entire process of subpoenaing the president. They'll lose on that. I think they will win on some areas of questioning. For example, why did you fire? What was your motive? What was your reasoning? I don't think you can question presidential acts that are covered by Article 2. But
you can't get to intent.
I don't think you can, or motive. But I think what you can get to is what the president's most vulnerable on, and that is business dealings before he became president. The irony is those questions that he has the best legal right to prevent are not the most important questions, whereas the ones he has no legal right to prevent are the most damaging questions.
Later on, we'll talk with LibertyNation.com political correspondent Graham Noble about the 40 or so questions Mueller supposedly intends to ask Trump and what those questions themselves reveal about the state of the special counsel investigation. But there's a whole lot of real-world consequences related to this investigation that go unreported, lives that have been damaged or ruined. Case in point, former Trump advisor Michael Caputo, who said on CNN this week that defending himself against the Mueller investigators has cost him $125,000, and he blames it all on the grandstanding former FBI Director James Comey, who's still out on his book tour.
I used to really respect James Comey, and 88% of this book is good. You know, but the last two chapters to me are a shame and a pox on the entire FBI.
Wow.
But the idea that this guy can go out and leak documents and do things to make sure a special counsel is put in place that ends up costing my family $125,000, I'm not fine with that.
Nor is Michael Flynn, whose life has been essentially ruined by this investigation, even though he committed no crimes beyond making a false statement to Mueller's investigators. And who knows how many others will end up as roadkill by the time Robert Mueller is finished. You wonder when the laws regarding special counsels and the latitude they're given to broaden their investigations almost infinitely will mercifully be overturned. As the Bill Clinton people will also tell you after the Whitewater investigation that became the Monica Lewinsky investigation, there's got to be a better way than setting a special counsel loose to do anything he wants. Now, if you wanted any more evidence of just how much the establishment media detests Donald Trump, we got it at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which Trump refused to attend for a second straight year, as the comedian chosen by the writers, Michelle Wolf, unleashed a vicious cut-down of the president.
Good evening. Here we are, the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Like a porn star says when she's about to have sex with a Trump. Let's get this over with. Trump is racist, though. He loves white nationalists, which is a weird term for a Nazi. Calling a Nazi a white nationalist is like calling a pedophile a kid friend.
Of course, the Trump haters in the media, like Jake Tapper, appearing on the late-night show of Trump hater extraordinaire, the cackling Jimmy Kimmel, took the opportunity to lash out at those who thought the comedian's remarks, including several particularly vicious ones about White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, were just fine.
If the Trump White House and their allies in the media want to have this conversation about decency, I welcome them to the table to talk about it. But there's a bunch of stuff that they need to get caught up on before we get to a comedian at the White House dinner. You know, we want to talk about whether or not it's appropriate to say that John McCain isn't a war hero because he was captured, and whether or not it's okay to make fun of people with disabilities, or talking about women's appearances in inappropriate ways. There's a backup of material if the Trump people want to talk about it.
Remember the old days when late-night comedy used to actually be funny? Anyway, we close our Say What segment with a couple of truly wacky statements from the two competitors in the 2016 presidential election. First, Hillary Clinton, who had people rolling on the floor laughing when she said in response to a question at one of those think tank events that she might have lost the election in part because she admitted that she's a capitalist, even though she's not.
You may be the only presidential candidate since World War II that actually had to stand up and say, I am a capitalist. And you did. Did it hurt you?
Probably. I mean, you know, it's hard. It's hard to know. But I mean, if you're in the Iowa caucuses and 41% of Democrats are socialists or self-described socialists, and I'm asked, "Are you a capitalist?" and I say yes, but with appropriate regulation and appropriate accountability. You know, that probably gets lost in the, oh my gosh, she's a capitalist.
Well, you can add that to the list of excuses for losing, which already numbers about a couple of dozen on Hillary's ongoing excuse tour. But that was nothing compared to President Trump's wacky idea of adding a sixth branch of the military. Now, there's the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and now
the Space Force. Does that make sense? The Space Force, General. You probably haven't even heard that. I'm just telling you now. This is perhaps because we're getting very big in space, both militarily and for other reasons. And we are seriously thinking of the Space Force.
There's so many possible jokes you could make from that, but it would take too long. But that, my friends, was quintessential Donald Trump. Don't forget to use Liberty Nation's new audio features so that you don't miss your dose of truth and facts, no matter how busy you might be. Now you can get narrated versions of all our top stories by simply clicking on the Play SoundCloud or Play in Browser tab in the Listen to the News section of our website. At LibertyNation.com, the truth is always just 2 clicks away. Well, it appears the explosively controversial defense of President Trump by rap artist Kanye West is having an effect on black support for the president. We'll talk about the aftermath of Kanye's audacious statements when we're joined by Jeff Charles of LibertyNation.com in just a moment.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
We believe that all men are entitled to blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Well, acclaimed rap artist Kanye West has stirred the souls of some and the anger of others with his explosively controversial remarks in support of President Trump and his refusal to go along with the Democrats anymore in recent days, and it seems to be having a real effect on black support for the president. Joining us now to talk about this is Jeff Charles, race relations and media affairs correspondent for LibertyNation.com. Jeff, welcome. And in the wake of l'affaire Kanye, we got some very interesting polling information about support for President Trump among black voters this week. It appears to be good news for Trump and bad news for the Democrats, yes?
Yes, I think so. The poll basically revealed that in last week, support among black men for President Trump doubled. And among black Americans in general, it went from about 8% to 16%. So that's a pretty significant jump. And to be fair, I'm sure that a lot of this has to do with the fact that the unemployment rate is decreasing. But the fact that it doubled among black men in 1 week shows that there's really no doubt that Kanye West has had at least somewhat of an impact on these new results.
Now, do you think this is more black people moving toward President Trump or more a matter of moving away from the Democrats?
It's more of a matter of black people moving away from Democrats. There are plenty of blacks that are moving towards Trump. A lot of them probably wouldn't say this out loud because of the repercussions. But I do see more of a disenchantment with the Democrat Party among black people, just in the things that I've read and seen.
Well, certainly we know that the Democrats are sunk if they cannot get at least 90% of the black vote. Of course, they lost the last election when Trump got just 8% and Hillary basically 90+% of the black vote. But this is a perilous situation for Democrats. But more has happened in the last week. After tweeting his thoughts a couple of weeks ago, Kanye made his first TV appearance since those tweets on TMZ. And I got to admit, Jeff, I have trouble interpreting his rather remarkable statement about slavery. But here is the soundbite that really stirred things up. Let's play it and then have you translate for us.
Hear about slavery for 400 years. For 400 years, that sounds like a choice. Like, you was there for 400 years and it's all of y'all? You know, like, it's like we're mentally in prison. I like the word prison because slavery goes too direct to the idea of blacks. It's like slavery, Holocaust Jews, slavery is blacks. So prison is something that unites us as one race, blacks and whites being one race. That we're the human race.
All right, so that's the infamous 400 years of slavery comment. What do you make of it? Try and translate that for us.
I'm going to be fair. I mean, what Kanye said in that clip was ridiculous. The idea that black slaves chose to be in the position that they were in is absurd. Everybody knows that. However, I don't necessarily think that was the message that he was really trying to communicate. Kanye, even in that same conversation and also on Twitter, and even afterward when he kind of clarified his remarks on Twitter, he was basically talking about more of a mental slavery that he feels a lot of blacks are in today, when they're basically voting and thinking the way that they're told to vote and think. So I think that from based on what I see in the context, that was the message he was trying to say. What came out of his mouth was something totally different. I think what we're seeing here is somebody who is not used to discussing these issues in a public forum. So when that happens, just to be frank, you're going to end up saying something pretty stupid at least once or twice. And unfortunately, he kind of gave the left what they needed to jump on. However, I don't think that this is going to do any lasting damage if he continues along this path of not backing down from his positions.
Is the real anger among the racial activists, the race hustlers, or poverty pimps, as they're called pejoratively, because Kanye says the president isn't such a bad guy, or because they're insulted by him saying, in effect, that they're slaves on the Democrats' plantation?
I would say it's both, but I'd say most of their anger is because of the fact that he doesn't hate Trump, that he actually likes him and has actually, taken to wearing a MAGA hat. They basically hate what they're seeing here. But they also don't like the fact that he's slammed Obama and the Democrats. So I think there's both at work here.
Well, let's move from the polling data and public statements to real life. And while I try not to do what the left does, which is to talk to one black person and then presume to know what all black people think, you are black and presumably have something of a pulse on what your black friends think about Trump and about the Democrat Party. What are your personal observations about Trump and African Americans now compared to when he was running for office or when he first became president?
A lot of it is still the same. I mean, I think you still have tons of black people who can't stand Trump, but there are a significant number that are starting to come around. And like I said before, a lot of it is them moving away from the Democratic Party. That's why people are hating what Kanye is saying so much, because he's not necessarily saying go out and vote for Trump. He's just saying don't be stuck with the Democrats. You don't have to just vote their way just because you're told to. Think for yourself. I think what we're going to see is more blacks maybe moving towards the middle, some going for Trump, some going for Republicans. But I think most of them are going to get to a point to where they're more open to considering a Republican candidate, whether it's at the local level, president, or at the state level.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Jeff Charles, race relations and media affairs correspondent for LibertyNation.com. Up next, a Liberty Nation exclusive, Scott Cosenza and his close encounter with Stormy Daniels.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Far more important than my political future and far more important than yours, the well-being of our country.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
So, as those of you who listen to this show regularly know, we have a segment called Talkin' Liberty, where we bring in our regular contributor and LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, Scott Cosenza. But this week, Scott's on vacation. He was planning to go, and I guess still is, going to go camping in western Pennsylvania. So he said, we need to do our segment. And I said, nah, just go enjoy your vacation. Well, he leaves, and lo and behold, on Thursday, the news breaks on NBC that there was a wiretap placed on the phone of Michael Cohen, the lawyer and fixer for Donald Trump. And so I call Scott and say, look, we better get you on the line to talk about this. Then that explodes, and it turns out that's not a real story. But then Scott comes in with something a whole lot better, a Liberty Nation exclusive. And Scott, I'm going to let you take it from there.
Well, thank you, Tim. From Steel City, USA. That would be Pittsburgh. I was having dinner in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania last night, and I was informed by a fellow diner, or maybe the wait staff, that Stormy Daniels was performing 2 blocks away. So, I'm willing to take one for the team, Tim. I've been on top of this case since the beginning, and what can I do? Duty called, so I had to make my way over to the Gentleman's Club, Blush, and take in the scene there.
Does that mean you blushed, or the name of the club was Blush? Okay, I just wanted to check on that. The name of the club was Blush.
Yes. Okay. Stormy had 2 shows scheduled for the night. I entered the club after the first show, in advance of the second show, and I wanted to ask her about, and I'm not joking here, I actually did want to ask her about whether her attorney, Mr. Avenatti, explained to her the potential downsides of the very latest suit she filed, which was a defamation lawsuit in federal district court in New York City against Donald Trump for a tweet. So anyway, that's what I was going to ask if I had the chance. But the place was raided by the fire marshals with some kind of an inspection attempt, or maybe the fellas just wanted to get their eyes on Stormy for themselves. I don't know, but there was an army of fire marshals and cops that came into the joint before her scheduled second show. But she was busy selling her autographs for, I think it was $10 for an autograph picture and $20 for a photo, if I'm remembering correctly. I did not. In the interest of partiality, I did not purchase either of those. So, yeah, that was it.
Well, now, what kind of queue was there? What kind of line?
Wow.
What kind of line was there to go see Stormy Daniels?
So the crowd, by the way, was generally a well-dressed, well-put-together crowd of, I'd say, white people in their 30s and 40s. There were a surprising number of couples. I saw one woman was telling me that her boss and her boss's wife had them come out. There's a lot of people were there for the spectacle, just for the memorialization of this sort of spectacular, weird moment in U.S. history, I guess. So there was a lot of that. And the line for the autographs and the pictures did not abate. It went, I was there for over an hour. And I mean, it was like wrapped around a corner and up the stairs, down the stairs from the VIP lounge. So
this kind of proves, I mean, so your personal experience now kind of proves what we've been talking about all along, that if nothing else, this provides this whole dust up, which is a kind way of putting it, with President Trump, is providing her the kind of publicity you could never pay for.
Tim, this is an idea of how it went in terms of pricing models, too, with what she can generate for the club. And I think it was 11 or 11:30 p.m. The bourbon on the rocks that I was drinking went from $8 to $16, literally a 100% increase in drink prices as it was approaching the published show time. So it is there's a lot of dough there.
Well, it'd be interesting to find out what her fee is now compared to, say, a year or two ago, when nobody except pornography aficionados knew who she was. Now, let's talk a little bit about this NBC story that came out with blazing headlines in some areas of the media on Thursday, that there was a wiretap placed on Michael Cohen that intercepted at least one phone call between Michael Cohen and Donald Trump, presumably when he was president. And then they said, whoops, our bad, didn't happen. What actually did happen? Because this is another teachable moment.
Yeah, Tim, this story came in like a lion and is going out like a lamb, it looks like. Today, the latest reporting from, I think it was the new anonymous sources quoted were 3 U.S. officials, so we presume they're Justice Department officials, was that a pen register was used. Now, that's sort of an antiquated term. A pen register used to be an actual physical device that would, when somebody keyed in either on an old rotary dial or keyed in tones on a keypad, old-fashioned landline telephone, it would actually make a physical record of that would then print out and they would be installed sort of like down the street in a telephone junction box from the target. And police could then go and see what calls were being made, the actual numbers that were being dialed, right? That was challenged as an infringement on privacy protections, and the Supreme Court ruled that there is no privacy expectation with those numbers that are dialed because you voluntarily give them to the phone company when you dial, right? Smith versus Maryland is the name of the Supreme Court case that was involved, and they said, well, if you're going to give the telephone company those numbers, then the police can look them. It doesn't constitute a search, and in fact, so there's no privacy protection in them. There are some rules that are Justice Department rules that govern when their attorneys are allowed to ask for this information, but we no longer actually have those physical pen registers installed, at the junction box. Now it's just done by a computer. You just get a list of numbers basically called by that office. And the reason why this is sort of a hugely significant deflation of the original story, Tim, is that the burden that one must meet in order to get what was presumed to be a Title III wiretap would show an amazing amount of sort of criminal activity, really just a fantastic amount in order to justify that wiretap. Because it was not that Title III wiretap and it is a pen register, basically it's just somebody at the Justice Department signs a sheet of paper that says, we might be able to get some information about criminal conduct by looking at these numbers, and that's it. So it's from a very high burden to not even a speed bump, basically, in the road.
Yet another black eye for the establishment media, which seems to have reversed the usual journalistic credo that you check sources first and then publish. It seems now that they run to publish and then try to backfill by confirming sources. I mean, this is just such an embarrassment for NBC News. And, of course, the president tweeted about it on Friday morning. And what he had to say wasn't very nice. But, Scott, we before we let you go, we got to talk about your story that you ran on LibertyNation.com about a member of the D.C. City Council and really head-shaking, almost incredible anti-Semitic remarks that were made by him as he was visiting the Holocaust Museum in Washington.
And his staff, Tim, don't forget.
Well, that is an important part of it.
Yeah. Trayon White is the name of the Ward 8 councilman, and he made some comments about Jews controlling the weather, some anti-Rothschild comments. And subsequent to that episode, he was invited to sort of, I guess, let's make nice invitation to go tour the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. And while there were a couple of vignettes posted about in the Washington Post who sent a reporter uninvited to sort of tag along for the story. And in one of them, there's a German girl being marched through the streets by literally jackbooted Nazi thugs. I mean, I know that there's a lot of talk in the media about Trump and whoever being Nazi.
But these were actual jackbooted Nazi thugs, right?
Yes, sir. And he says, are they protecting her? And the tour guide says, no, they're marching her through. And White says, oh, marching is protecting. And then in a later incident, they're talking about the Warsaw Ghetto and showing the exhibit around it. And and one of his staff says, "Oh, it's like a gated community."
Wow! I mean that is
breathtaking, Tim. Breathtaking.
That is breathtaking. The Warsaw Ghetto a gated community, and this is an actual elected public official on the city council of the capital of the United States of America.
Yeah, and by the way, just for the record, I don't even necessarily think he's an anti-Semite. He's probably just breathtakingly ignorant.
I would think you're right. I would think you're right. Although there have been, previous iterations of anti-Semitism emanating from the D.C. City Council, but we're not going to go into the whole history of that. Rather, we'll leave it at this.
That colorful history.
Indeed. Thank you, Scott. Now go and enjoy your vacation.
Thank you, Tim.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
We believe that all men are entitled to blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
In a city that leaks not just like a sieve, but a broken sieve where the tiny holes have turned into gaping holes, we found out in this week's most shocking leak, though I suppose nothing is actually shocking anymore, what questions Special Counsel Robert Mueller supposedly intends to ask Donald Trump if the president agrees to an interview or is subpoenaed to give a deposition. The questions are revealing about not only the state of the investigation, but what kind of strategy Mr. Mueller has in mind for trying to get the goods on Trump. And joining us to talk this out is Graham Noble, who's been writing about this investigation for some time, and he wrote a piece on it this week on LibertyNation.com that covered the waterfront. And Graham, it was a really comprehensive piece, and I want to start out by asking you to explain one of the simplest but most meaningful things that you wrote, which is that the list of questions looks like, or very much like, a fishing expedition.
Yeah, Tim, that's what it struck me as. There was a lot of questions, well over 40 questions, and they were all very open-ended questions. And when you read those, and of course the questions that as they've been printed in the media, New York Times was the first publication to print these questions. They're not verbatim. So for whatever reason, they're not the exact word for word questions, but they give the gist of what these questions are. And they're very general. They're very open-ended, and it's not too many of them are specific. So obviously, one of the things about these questions is obviously each of these questions could actually lead to numerous other questions. But they definitely seem to be fishing for, what the president might tell them about what was going through his mind, what he was thinking, what his motivations were behind certain words and actions. So, that's basically what I meant by a fishing expedition, because they I don't know, they seem to be, very general, very unspecific.
Now, you write in your article that the questions for the president indicate that the special counsel may be attempting to attribute criminal intent to actions taken by Trump that, in fact, fall easily within his authority as chief executive. What do you mean by that?
Well, there really specifically, I was referring to the firing of James Comey, the former FBI director. The main focus, or so everyone supposes, because of course, what do any of us really know about what's going on in Mueller's head, or what he's really aiming for? But there's a general perception that Mueller is perhaps trying to pin obstruction of justice on the firing of Comey. And my point there was that, really, as president of the United States, Trump is well within his authority to fire James Comey for absolutely any reason, including, as I wrote in the article, just simply because he wishes to replace him with someone that he feels would be more effective in that role. I mean, Trump really doesn't actually need a an excuse to fire Comey, and he doesn't. I don't see that he needs to explain to anyone or justify to anyone why he fired James Comey. You know, I think, quite frankly, it's a bit of a smart-ass comment, but I almost think that Trump's, response to Mueller about the firing of Comey is I fired him because I could.
Right. I mean, and he is clearly within his constitutional authority because he is the head of the executive branch, which is the only of the three branches that is headed by a single person. But it seems to me akin to have the president wax about why he made the decision he made would be, it seems to me, like requiring a senator to explain a vote on a piece of legislation or requiring a Supreme Court justice to explain why he voted a certain way on a certain court case. Cannot be asked to explain the motive when they're acting within their constitutional authority. Let me conclude this by asking you to explain the final words, really, in your article, which are, this seemingly interminable investigation may not continue indefinitely after all. Why do you say that?
Well, of course, one thing that is well known about special counsel investigations is that they go on for a very, very long time. I just think that my perception of this is the mere fact that the Mueller team has submitted this extensive list of questions to the White House legal team. And that they're really talking about a sit down with Mueller. You know, the way all of these investigations always go, they follow the same pattern. They start with the people at the bottom of the food chain, and they work their way up. You know, and now that we're getting to the point of written questions from Mueller to the Trump team and talking about a sit down, I believe it actually does suggest that quite possibly, and I could be completely wrong here, but I believe that we're looking at possibly an end to this investigation, however it turns out, within a matter of probably 1 or perhaps 2 or 3 more months rather than 6, 8, 10, 12 months.
Well, you would think that given that we have midterm elections, which are very important in November, that that the special counsel would either end the investigation by the summer or wait until after the election to officially end the investigation, at which point it could be any point after the November election. But I don't see a decision coming in the next couple of weeks, to be sure. But I can't see where it would be revealed in the fall, either in the run-up to the election.
I don't see how these questions really discredit the investigation. I'm not sure that they don't tell us. I'm not sure they tell us anything that we didn't already know or suspect, and that is that Mueller is casting a very, very wide net and almost seems to be, looking for a crime. I'm not sure if anybody really on either side wants this whole matter to drag on through the midterms and into next year. I don't see it. And yes, I don't believe that that Mueller's going to kind of zip this thing up anytime within the next 3-4 weeks or even 6 weeks. But certainly I could see that yes, by the end of the summer. I think there is a reasonably good chance that we may actually see an end to this thing by the end of the summer.
All right, Graham, thanks for joining us. Most appreciative.
You're welcome, Tim. Thank you.
Graham Noble, political correspondent for LibertyNation.com. This show, Liberty Nation Radio, as well as Liberty Nation's own podcast, The Uprising, are available to you on demand at LibertyNation.com, as well as from fine podcast providers everywhere. Well, that'll about wrap it up for this week, but fear not, we'll be back at you next week. Same time, same station, and, of course, on demand. Until then, this is Tim Donner saying stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation.